Going. You all right?
We're live. Good
Yeah, we're
grief.
live. Well, we're still just about. That's an interesting room. That's not your home. Where in the world are
That
you?
is not. I'm in my Italian villa.
Ah,
Um,
okay. Interesting bed.
I'm yes, yeah,
Handcuff-friendly
yeah,
bed.
yeah. That's it.
Oh, handcuffs
Actually, it's
and.
the whole lot. The whole
Right.
lot. Yeah.
I heard you were on
But
the run, but what are you doing?
yeah, no, I'm
Robbie
working from
Biggs. You've done the great train
Italy.
robbery, have
Yeah,
you?
it feels like it. It's a proper old villa, and it's like a little small holding. We've got horses and chickens and all that, and it's out in the sticks, about in an undisclosed location an hour north of Rome. So
A deserted farmhouse. Buster will be turning up in a while, will he?
pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe it was all the
But
gags we've been doing about Broadmoor. A few more emails from our constituency in Broadmoor, not too happy with some of the jokes and saying they were going to come round for a one-to-one meeting or something. But you've done
that's
a
all right. They
bunch.
can make their way out here then. Yeah, knew you well.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Managed to avoid all the lurgy that's going around. I think everyone else has had it, but managed to
Yeah,
pretty much avoid it, I think. But
good
you
on.
lurgy free?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, but I've had a bit of a plague house cross
Uh,
painted on the door and everything for about a week. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Mrs. and Emily, both poorly and off and whatever. But it's all right.
yeah, I'm sure it will start again for me soon when the kids come back to work and I'm in amongst all the 19-year-olds to pick up all the germs they've been sharing. But oh well, good. Right, well, we should crack on. Well, we've got the opportunity, hopefully free from distractions, except when the police
Yeah.
raid you, obviously. But they have found you out, or Reggie the dog Trubshaw kind of locates you. But okay, so as per usual, I've selected my turn. I've selected a little video. It's only short. It's about a minute and 20 seconds. I'll play it through. You haven't seen it. You may have seen it before. It's been doing the rounds for a while. And then give me your impressions. Just a little bit of preamble because it's slightly different to the ones that we've looked at before. We've been primarily interested in stuff that is kind of out and out self-defense, sort of attacks by, others against innocent parties. And this isn't. This is what you probably call a bar fight, right? Or it's something resembling a fight, not particularly fighting, but it's two groups or a bunch of individuals fighting with each other. Right? It's not a self-defense situation per se, but I think
Hmm.
there's a number of lessons in it about, what would you do in terms of self-defense not to be in that situation. And secondly, there's some other things going on within it, which I think perhaps they give rise to some interesting thoughts and lessons about training and the purpose of training and what you should train at and so on. So hopefully it will make sense and you'll pick a few things out from it that are relevant to us rather than just I say that to avoid any kind of confusion that we're just looking at kind of violence for violence sake. I think there is some self-defense stuff that can be extracted from this, and then there's also some other stuff about how people actually fight when they come to fight.
Mm.
So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah. Is that your
Yeah.
local or mine?
Hey.
Is that your
Yeah.
local or mine?
Yeah. I mean, already, right? Well, what's your impressions of the gaff?
So the carpet straight away, the doors, then I'm not quite sure, but there's some market-looking Adidas there on a pair of feet. Is
Yeah.
all a bit um, Weatherspoon's drinking team, but yeah,
Yeah.
let's see what goes
Yeah, I
on.
mean it's immediately looking sketchy, isn't it, inside? I mean that's not no disrespect to the place, but that's not a high class establishment that you're looking at straight away. So if you're walking through the door and you see that, maybe you should turn around and walk back out. But maybe we're doing them a disservice. Maybe on another day it's a wonderful, quiet family pub.
No doubt.
Anyway, here goes. Just going to turn the sound out a fraction. Right. So did you get all that?
Yeah. Oh, the sound in and out, but that's sort of by the by. Yeah,
There wasn't
proper
much
fun.
interesting to hear apart from a few expletives and a leave him alone and get back, the usual kind of shouting.
Yeah, yeah. So, initial thoughts, it just looks like chaotic and lots of ineffectual playground level fighting done by grown-ups inside of a pub.
Yeah.
People are charging into each other and pushing, pulling. Anybody who's down gets pulled and ragged about, and some sort of, real intent of raining blows on them, but with absolutely zero capacity to. No idea who's fighting who. Nobody seems to have any awareness of that either, because almost everybody gets attacked to the back of the head at some point. Couple of things, clearly on the floor, people getting ragged and kicked almost immediately by people you can tell who, aren't trained and aren't competent. But how many times have we said before, you put a round, roughly football sized shape on the ground and people boot it, look very messy, lots and lots of stuff not doing damage, and then a couple of things that probably did some major damage, bottles off the back of the head, stomps on the ground when they're lying still and the head's flat on the floor, the stuff that with zero training is still sort of, hugely damaging. But yeah, and initially it's just mayhem, people standing back watching and happy to sort of laughing it off as it goes. Nobody really throwing. I'm not sure I saw a single punch, maybe one thrown. The rest was sort of, flailing arms, lots of pushing, grabbing, ragging, making it up as you go along, with no intention of sort of doing a thing and getting away. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was, there's lots of interesting reflections there. Maybe we can kind of piece a few of those together in terms of the quality of the shots, the ragging element, the kicking the downed opponent, the ineffectual attacks that are there in the main. I thought we could also maybe break it up and think about it from a self-defense perspective or self-protection perspective. We often talk a lot about kind of awareness and stuff like that, but if we imagine that case slightly differently, right? Imagine that you walk into that pub and you're someone who's alert and wanting to be kind of safe. What kind of things are you going to spot there? Now, let me give you a little bit of background to this, because I did Google it after I watched it, and this apparently took place in a pub in Guernsey. For those, if we get a non-Brit viewer at all, I suppose I should probably say a little bit about Guernsey. Guernsey is one of the Channel Islands. It's technically part of the British Isles, but it's closer to the coast of France than it is to Britain, and it's largely autonomous. It kind of pretty much governs itself, as does Jersey, slightly bigger island, and so do some of the others like Sark, the smaller ones, and so on. So it's kind of a holiday destination for many people. It's very exclusive in many ways. You have to be born there to live there, or you have to have a few million in the bank to move there. So it's fairly exclusive. It's tax haven, I believe. But a lot of people go there on holiday, and there's a lot of seasonal workers there as well. And from what I understand, the older guy that you saw in the video, him and one or two others, not sure, were on holiday in Guernsey, not themselves the whitest of white characters, by all accounts, and something started up between them and the locals in the pub. Again, many of them, and particularly the one that was throwing the pool ball and and cracking the old guy over the head with a bottle. I think had been convicted previously of violence as well, as had some of the others. It kicked off, and then you saw kind of what happened. I think they all got prosecuted successfully, and quite rightfully probably did some time in prison. So from that perspective, we can see why it's a fight, not self-defense. But from the perspective of thinking about keeping yourself safe by not getting into that situation, I thought it might be just interesting to kind of reflect on, that thing where you are away, like you are at the moment, you are away, you are traveling, maybe you're on holiday, maybe you're on business or work related stuff, you don't know the area, and you kind of, you go into a bar with the family or friends or whatever it is, or you go in for a meal, and you kind of, your spider senses are kind of going off at that kind of stuff, right? Looking at that pub, knowing British pubs, you kind of are immediately, stereotyping what you see there from, like you say, the decor, the carpet, and the kind of the general state of repair.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few other tells. Again, we're going to have to sort of generalize, but you walk into a pub where you've got the decor, as we've seen. You've got a pool table right close to the bar. Generally, that's, sort of not necessarily the most family orientated of places. Everybody in there looks like they've perhaps come in from work, or certainly half of them did. There's people drinking in high-vis tops and stuff like that. Nothing wrong. I wear a high-vis top for 5 days a week when, if I'm doing site visits and that. But then to go out and carry on drinking in that, it's obviously, it's probably slightly more affordable, might be, discounted beers, therefore it gets it has a certain draw to a certain audience. All those things that would ring out to me walking in going, should we try this pub? It will be a quick sort of, perhaps we shouldn't try this pub.
Yeah, it's it's a locals pub, right? That's I think the point I'm driving at. You can walk into places and go, all right, this is really a locals pub. This isn't a tourist pub, right? This isn't set up for tourists and families and stuff. And I grew up in a place like the Channel Islands. Is a little bit closer to England than the Channel Islands, but heavy summer season, full of tourists and so on. And many of the pubs were, deliberately catering for the tourist trade, but there were also local pubs, right? They were pubs for the locals, and generally they didn't welcome tourists, right? If you're a tourist, they would kind of turn. It wasn't quite like American Wealth in London, where the guy misses the dartboard, but and but heads would turn and look, and if you weren't a local, then or they didn't recognize you, then you'd get a very frosty reception. Generally they're the ones that didn't do food either, so it's like bar snacks only, keep the tourists out. But yeah, as a tourist, that kind of sense of, well, look, I go in there's people in work clothes, it's mid to late afternoon, this does look like a locals pub. Is that going to be an issue here? What kind of vibe am I getting from that? What are the prices like? Is there food available? What's it set up to cater for? And maybe they don't want me in here. If they're all friends and they're all sat at the bar and they've been drinking in there for the last 15 years or whatever it is, or they're introduced to that bar when they're kids and they grow up in that place and that's the bar they go to, maybe they don't want me in here, right? It's not a case of I can just wander in and start chatting away, right? They're not interested in outsiders coming in, right? So that would be one thing I think I'd be looking at if I'm on holiday somewhere. Is this a real locals pub? Because there can often be that animosity as well, between us. And having worked in bars and nightclubs for quite a while, reminded of that kind of thing, that alcohol and different backgrounds don't mix terribly well, right? You get clash of different cultures, classes, and so on with alcohol. Tends to inflame those differences rather than kind of smooth them out in many cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of the people that sort of looking at this will perhaps have some knowledge of sort of drinking in Britain. And it is something culturally specific. I'm in Italy at the minute, and I travel to Spain a lot, and I travel to sort of across the sort of the Med quite a bit. Now, sometimes the sort of the very locals, workers based, are the best places for a good breakfast, and they're more than happy for you to go in and have a beer in there. And it's not always patently obvious whether you should or you shouldn't be in there. Sometimes in Italy, in some of the cities, you get sort of heavily scarved walls, and you can clearly tell that they are a distinct supporter of a certain team, and that's might attract certain attention to someone who isn't from there, let alone from another part of the city, from another part of the world. But there's something specific to sort of English or British, certainly British territory pubs that are for the locals. And I think maybe because we drink more, we tend to drink a little more to excess. I don't, in my experience, I've seen it kick off in the UK 50 times more often than it ever has out in the Med, unless you choose somewhere where you find a load of Brits or a bit of a melting pot.
I'm fortunate enough to be where there's a football tournament going on. Yeah. You turn up
But
for your nice
no,
quiet holiday in Alicante or somewhere, and there's international football or something going on. But and then you're in trouble. But yeah, that's true. I'm reminded. I know we spoke about before, you and I, but we've done some stuff around this. But the book Left of Bang. I mean, there's a lot of stuff written on intuition. Gavin De Becker's stuff on the gift of fear. Picking up on that kind of inner alarm that goes off and so on. My particular favorite is kind of Left of Bang, which is a book, as you know, written by, I think it was someone that was allied to the US Marine Corps. They were trying to work out why in Iraq, early on in Iraq, in the intervention in Iraq by the Americans, that there were so many kind of casualties to ambushes, roadside bombs, improvised explosive devices, that kind of stuff. And when they started to drill down into the numbers a little bit, they started to realize that the casualties were higher if they were kind of those from upper, sort of not lower level income groups, so the fairly affluent soldiers from fairly affluent backgrounds, or from more rural areas. And so well, in that case, why are the ones from kind of urban, lower socioeconomic groups less susceptible to this kind of ambush and stuff? And so they did some kind of studies and worked out fairly quickly that the kind of environment that they were putting the soldiers in was relatively similar to the environments that a lot of the squaddies were being drawn from, and they were just better tuned to that kind of urban environment, lots going on, lots of people around, bustling around, and interactions with people in that kind of environment. And when that environment changed, when something was off in that environment, they kind of just intuitively picked up on it, right? They read the micro cues without realizing that they were reading the micro cues. They walked down a road, turned a corner, and suddenly everything's quiet. There's no kids on the street. There's no one out, and they realize that that's not right. That doesn't chime with how a busy street on a Thursday should be here. And so they kind of back out. Whereas everyone say, "Oh, a nice clear street. Let's go down this street." And actually, that's because all the locals know not to be there because there's an ambush being set up, or they planted something in the street. And so I think it's a great kind of idea, which is what are the micro cues? Right. What are the things that when we talk about intuition we actually mean? Well, it just means a familiarity with the context in which we are, that allows us to pick up on abnormalities within that. And if you don't have the experience of being in that, then it's very difficult to pick up on what's not right about a situation. So it's very context dependent, and that's the danger when you go somewhere new, right? Sure, if you go to the local pubs in the local town, which ones are the great ones, which ones you don't really like, which ones have the beer that you want, where you go if you want a meal, the kind of people that go there, the best times to go. You have that kind of local knowledge, but you go somewhere else and you just don't have that knowledge, right? So you have to rely on your kind of your gut instinct of, well, what can I tell about this place when I go in? and
Yeah.
what do I do if I get a bad vibe off it? And just like the state repair, the kind of people that are in terms of their dress, the prices of the beer, whether they serve food. I think all those kinds of things, that, but in and of themselves, and individually, they're no indicator. But in a cluster, if you think, yeah, actually, it does look a bit sketchy. A lot of people are looking at me a bit strangely when I walk in. Maybe it's time to back out the door slowly, or at least just have a drink and drink it fairly quickly and get out and move somewhere else, rather than feeling like you've got to stay here for the next 3 hours because we walked in the door.
Yeah, ego management. Also acceptance. It's the same in any conflict. It's the acceptance of the trouble. The acceptance you're in the fight, in a fight, shouldn't come from when you first get your nose spread across your cheeks. It should be that sort of body posturing,
Yeah,
the types of approach, and all the kinds of tells that are as it amps up to it. And it's no different there.
yeah,
You're in trouble, or potentially in the wrong environment, if you walk in and it looks like it looks, plus everybody's male, there's clearly no families in there, it's clearly during the daytime because it's quite bright, everybody's drinking, this sort of pints going down. Okay, it might be a Saturday, but yeah, it's not a big Saturday vibe. It was definitely a sort of
yeah,
all the regulars in the watering hole
yeah,
vibe. And
yeah,
that ego management to say, all right, yeah, I've come up to the bar, they're serving tenants at £1.40 a pint, time to leave. But maybe you're there and it's the only place you can get a drink, so you have a half and you sit where you can see the door and the people, and you can choose an exit, and then you finish and you leave.
yeah,
Keep your eyes down a little, but
yeah. But
accepting that you're in that.
yeah, and maybe just being overly jumpy. Maybe there's nothing wrong. Maybe a little bit paranoid, but better to kind of beat a retreat if it feels a bit off. I mean, and then of course, once you're in that situation, you go in, you think it's going to be fine, and then the next stage is, if there's going to be trouble, if someone's looking to cause an issue with someone that they don't recognize, or that they perhaps have seen once or twice, or whatever, then it's going to start in a certain way, right? It's going to start with some looks, it's going to start with some kind of stage whispers, or it's going to start with pointing and talking to their mates whilst looking at you. It's going to start with someone getting close, it's going to start with some questioning, all those kinds of things that are going to gently just start the ball rolling to trouble. It's going to come as a challenge. They're going to interview you at some point if this is the way it's going. So being alive to those things as well as part of the awareness game. The strange look across the bar, the guy that won't stop staring at you, one that talks to his mate whilst he's looking at you. Right, these are the things that can't, or the innocuous question, or the kind of the semi-challenging statement, that kind of you look like you've had an easy life, that kind
Yeah,
of thing. The thing that's just a little bit pointed, tries to get you to react a little bit, or just makes you go, oh no, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to, and then suddenly there's a bit of sport there, because this is quite clearly a wimp from out of town, a foreigner, right, from the mainland, who's come over, and now you've had a bad day, so you can start to have a little bit of sport with this one, and everyone else knows what you're doing because they know you, and so on, and you're just sat there going, what the hell's going on here, right? You haven't picked up on those micro cues of that they all realize is happening, that Big John in the corner, he's had a bad day, and when he's had a bad day, he comes in here and sinks 3 pints within 30 minutes, and then starts one of the customers, and today it's going to be someone from out of town, and they've seen it materialize 10 times already, and he's just going to go through the same procedure again. Being alert to that, I guess, is a key thing, and then beating an easy retreat, a hasty retreat, in that way, whilst allowing him to kind of feel the big man, and not push it any further than necessary. So, yeah.
yeah. It's difficult. Clearly they were all in there drinking for, the guy had, sort of the big guy, the big John, righteous indignation, dropping off next to the pool table before he gets stoved in.
Yeah.
He it had already been kicking off, and he decided to come bowling back in and remonstrate. So
Yeah.
he's either buoyed up with alcohol,
Yeah.
he's been there long enough to have got some in him,
Yeah.
or whatever. He's of that environment, but you say, he's an out of towner, but he's not foreign to that environment, so he's not backing down because he's Big John on tour sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
he's
he
got
was
his mates
a
as
tall
well.
guy.
Yeah.
He's probably not accustomed to somebody sticking it back to him if he's an ex big lad who's drank in his own local for ages and now doesn't get any trouble. He thinks he's the big man. So he missed his opportunities to start to extract himself. Clearly wasn't thinking about anything other than, I'm going to say my piece. I'm going to tell these guys, and waded back in, I think twice before he got the bottle on his noggin and then a couple of stomps.
No, and I used to see this, living on an island, you get the mainlanders come over, and they think that you're all cherry pickers and kind of straw chewers, and the locals think that they're all kind of they don't live a hard life, they live a soft life. There's some ponce from the mainland come over thinking he's hard. Whereas they all work on the roads or in the fields all day, and and so you got that kind of clash of egos. Yeah, no, absolutely. That was clearly the case. I was reminded of a story that Peyton Quinn once told me, which was he walked into a bar. It sounds like the start of a joke, but he walked into a bar. He was a big motorcyclist, Peyton, as well as a great kind of martial artist. Walked into a bar somewhere in Texas after a day on the bike, on the Harley, and wanted to, as he said, blow the froth off a couple. And he went to the bar and ordered a beer, and there was a guy in work clothes next to him who said exactly what I said. He turned around to him and said, "Well, you look like you've had an easy life." And Peyton said to him, "Yeah, I guess so. Not as easy as I would have liked, but you look like you can graft. You look like you can work hard. What do you do?" And the guy goes, "Well, I work on the black top. I do this, I do that." And he said, "Well, what's your job on the black?" He said, "Oh, I drive this machinery. There's no such and such that I can't drive, that I can't do this." He said, I just let him talk about his job, and then he started to talk about his family, and he started to talk about his, the problems he was having with his oldest son, and he said after about 10 minutes we were the best friends in the world. He said, but that 10 minutes, he said, the entire time I was just trying to manipulate him to a slightly better attitude towards me so I could finish my drink and then make my excuse to go. He said, because I knew I couldn't leave before that point because he would start to get riled up at me. So I was literally having to kind of entertain him with his own story and get him to kind of tell him about me, because I knew that was safe territory, until I could actually just kind of finish enough of my beer in a reasonable amount of time to walk out the door. At that point, he said, I stood up, I shook his hand, said, "Gotta go, nice meeting you," and got to the door and then ran to his bike. I'm not sure if he ran to his bike, but so it's like straight out of there after that. Didn't wait for a second beer or anything like that, because I knew it to go south at any other point. I realized I'd made a mistake. I picked the wrong bar, stood in the wrong place, had to kind of extract myself through a little bit of dialogue and giving the other guy a face-saving kind of situation to allow me to get out the door.
Yeah, but that you're very, very fortunate if you're the kind of person that can manage that situation that well, without having either the absolute sort of unshakable doubt that you'll tune up everyone in the whole bar. You are once were warriors, Jake the Muss. Or you've practiced it. You've done something to manage adrenal stress. You've read the situations. You know that you could just bolt it, but you'd have to literally bolt it. Otherwise, you're talking your way out, and you need to do it well. That's not easy. I find, the stuff that we do in class, whenever it gets to scenario based stuff, Peyton Quinn scenario based training, and as soon as you say, well, start chucking some words in, you could do a little bit of play acting, amp it up. It's if that was graded, no one would pass ever. It's really difficult, even in a very safe environment. people really struggle with that sort of dram
Yeah,
aspect of it.
yeah,
So
yeah. And you know, I mean, I think the problem of doing that in kind of, this is a real difference between training and reality, which is, you know, we tried to do some of that, and down the years done more than that than I do now, but we tried to do some of that, and we do it in various things under adrenal stress in the fast courses and so on.
yeah,
I think the gap, I think it's useful, but I think the gap between, so there's two gaps, you know, the reality gaps. There's two reality gaps. One is between the training of the physical element and the reality of the physical element. There's always a gap between those two things. We try and
yeah,
narrow that gap reasonably, you know, to a smaller possibility as we can, so that, you know, what we train matches what we're likely to face in reality as close as we can get it safely. And I think that gap can get fairly close. The other reality gap is between the kind of dialogue of training and the reality of a verbal confrontation, a verbal opener before the physical starts. And
yeah,
I think, you know, that the gap for that is much wider for a number of reasons, which is, you know, first of all, you can't really replicate all the different eventualities that come from a conversation with another person, right? It can go in so many different unpredictable ways depending on, you know, what you're dressed in compared with the tone of your voice, and, you know, what they pick up on, that becomes and so it's much more variable. The second thing is, like, you know, doing it in class, you know, even with, you know, good role player with sunglasses and hats and disguises and stuff like that, the brain kind of gets into the mood with that. But, you know,
yeah,
even that, you know, which we can't replicate very often, even that, yeah, deep down you just know it's Rob in a hat, you know, doing the dram stuff, and it's not really scary in the same way
yeah,
that, you know, that dude in front of you shouting at you in that bar is really scary, or, you know he's trying to needle you just to get a reaction so he can justify hitting you. Right, that's going to be way different to the practice stuff that you can ever do. So I think it's important to do it, but it has limited applicability, or limited use, limited utility, training it, because I think that gap's just so big that you can't actually cross that gap. The only way you could do it, you know, with any kind of crossover, would be to run the scenario that you're interested in multiple times with multiple possible outcomes, most of which are kind of, you know, non-violent ones. But if you think about it, most of the way people run scenario training, you know, you do one where the guy goes, all right, oh, I'm really sorry, and walks away, and the next 10 you're hitting him, right?
yeah,
Which, you
yeah,
know, it's probably going to be the other way around, right? You know, 10 of those you're going to walk away from, and one maybe gets a bit pushy, a bit shovey, right? Yeah, and for most scenarios that's where it's going to be, but we do it the other way around, and I think that just kind of skews things even further. You know, it's just, you just don't run enough of the scenarios to get all the different possibilities, because it would take forever, right? You know,
yeah.
imagine a class of, you know, 20 people, and you're trying to run 10 scenarios for each. It's going to take you a week, and everyone's got to be really good at doing their roles, right? You know, if you,
It's really
yeah,
hard. Think of the seminar stuff that we
yeah,
do.
yeah,
So, you know, it will take most of the day of stressing and fatiguing people, psychologically playing with them, and then some sort of summary at the end,
yeah,
until you feel like, now they're bought in and they're adrenalized
yeah,
and they're not thinking, because, you
yeah,
know, we do well to mask up, or we bring in stooges and stuff like that. That's a full day of
yeah,
working really hard to break somebody to right at that end point of getting them to react
yeah,
truthfully. And
yeah.
it's not feasible in a training
No,
situation twice a week for an hour and a half each, you
no.
know.
Yeah, no. So if that's the reality of it, then, you know, and I think a lot of the soft skills are the most important skills. Then, you know, just understanding that, getting good at a spotting trouble, right, those micro cues, and thinking about it in advance, and b, you know, be putting yourself in situations where you have to kind of think on your feet, talk to people. That's probably better training than, you know, doing the odd scenario replication in a martial arts class once in a blue moon. You're better off putting yourself in social situations where you're meeting new people, having to, especially if that's not your job or you're not used to that kind of stuff, getting used to kind of talking to people in that situation. If you're going to spend time in and around other people, then you probably need to get used to talking to them. I always think customer services people that come to training are always the best at doing that, right? They're just so used to kind of deflating people. It's like taking all the heat out of the room. It's like, yeah, okay.
Well, I've just flown today, and I'm regularly on. Unfortunately, living in the East Midlands, Ryanair is the most populous. Sort of out of East Mids and Birmingham and Leeds, and so you end up on Ryanair flights with the sort of the package holiday crew who you're really treated like cattle, and everybody's there has probably got there early and had a few drinks and then is having a drinky on the plane. And the number of sort of miniature flashpoints that I see the staff having to deal with quite robustly as well, they've really desensitized to it because they must just get it day in,
all the
day
time.
out.
Yeah. I mean, now we dealt with that sort of stuff and the kind of awareness avoidance from a self-defense perspective. I think we should have a look at the physicality stuff again and pull out some of those bits and pieces. You mentioned a couple. Let me just can you see the screen again now? I'm just gonna play it forwards a little bit to where I wanted it. So to begin with, I don't know why it kicked off, but a lot of pushing and pulling, right? Like everyone's like a big bundle at school, isn't it? Lots of people.
Someone's sort of half down, but no one's really.
Yeah.
No one's getting battered there.
No. And this bit here, this guy in the hoodie, who's just got up off the floor. I think he must be one of the mainlanders because the guy on the floor still is the old chap. But there's you said that lots of flailing attacks. Yeah, look at the. I think there's a couple of punches that come in now.
He managed to chuck a pint on him. And then he's down to ragging him again.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the purpose of just tipping a drink over him at that point was, but it just shows that you're in that kind of mentality, right? That he's not thinking at that moment, right? That if you said to him in advance of that, what would you do if there's a guy fighting you? He's not going to say, "Oh, I would tip a drink over him." He's going to, "Oh, I'd hit him with a 1-2, I'd drag him to the floor, I'd kick his head." At no point is he going to go, "I'd tip a drink over him," right? Because it served no useful purpose, right? It didn't even hit him with a glass, which would have been
no, that's the thing. He either chickened out or, like you say, chimp mode, no plan, and it's like, well, this is what I'm doing. My body's just running through things.
And that's all I have. The quality of the punches was pretty. See if I can rewind it back. That one missed, but basically just hit him with as far as I can see, hit him with a straight left.
Hands open as it comes away from him there.
Yeah.
So he did get something sort of straight out and a bit of a loop on the end of it.
Yeah.
But luck more than anything.
Yeah. As the other guys. So he's getting up here. Here it comes. Yeah, it's that left hand that hits him as mate in the grey is throwing a right, and that's the one that sends him down, I think. Right hand. So he just gets a straight up punch in.
Yeah.
And that's enough to knock him down. Right? Interesting.
Yeah. And he goes straight in for a kick to the head. It was really duff, but that was his intent.
Yeah. He kind of bounces it off his shoulder, I think. There. Yeah. So it doesn't connect. Pint goes over him, totally ineffectual. Now ragging him down to the floor in a kind of turtle position, and then things cut to. Then we get the argy-bargy with the gaffer. Look at the head pecking. Head pecking, the shoulders go. Use lot, you will think you're hard. Whatever he's talking about. Here comes.
And then your man running in,
Yeah. Matey in green, ragging.
Yep.
Some more ragging. Spins him off his feet. Boom, head hits the table. Use of the environment. Introduces him to the ambiance of the wonderful establishment that this place is.
Then he starts with the hammer fists.
Yes.
So he sort of not sure what he's doing here, like a half throttle push him against the table thing.
Yeah.
And then he tries to sort of hammer fist him, but they're all they're sort of waving all over the guy.
Proper combatives guy, hammer fist, hammer fist, hammer fist.
Here they come.
Slap.
Yeah.
It's just slapping him, isn't it? Downward slaps.
Yeah, you can see how sort of.
Yeah, try and force the head down. Usual tactic, force the head down. Then we get a bit of a view. Be going there in the summer. Matey's got up and with the hand of a few others pushed him across the table. So he's kicking his way off, using his feet. Matey thinks it's all done now. No,
He's stood up straight, ready to gob off again.
Yeah, picks up the cue ball. Goodness knows how close that was to his head.
Yeah.
Probably
He
killed
didn't
him.
even see it.
No, probably killed him. Oh, there's that guy, I think locally, who was killed when a kid threw a brick at him from about 3 feet away.
Yeah, down at the where the new library is in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then boom, off the top of the head with a bottle, and that does for him. A wine bottle by the looks of it.
Classy joint.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't need to see the stump. But yeah, I mean, I think the couple of things that you picked out was the ineffectual shots.
Yeah.
Right? By and large, it's only when he introduced a weapon that he seemed to do any damage.
Yeah. Yeah. Of all of that, there's the sort of the one left that seems to go in, and then nobody sort of the what looked like the foreigners, so the tall guy and then the guy who's getting ragged on the floor, didn't see a single punch thrown by any of those. There's just remonstrating, but not willing to give up that righteous indignation to tell them how tough they are as they get ragged all over the guy.
Yeah.
And all the rest of them piling in. You saw a couple of pretty loose arm, feebly, slappy palm hammers. Nothing else. Nobody's throwing anything else. It's the the cue ball and the wine bottle. There's pool cues there. There's chairs and tables rolling in amongst them, and nobody does anything with any of them. So
yeah, and these are the violent people in town, right? They're the ones that they have the reputation. They're the ones that cause the trouble. But in physical terms, they wouldn't. Yeah, they're not common. They wouldn't last more than a few minutes with the gloves on in a ring with someone that knows what they're doing. But bags and bags of attitude, right?
Yeah.
Bags and bags of attitude. I was reading some of the comments on the YouTube thing, and most of the comments were, and I understand it, about the guy in green, he's an animal, right? That's not a fair fight. You don't do this, you don't do that. He's an animal, should be locked away. Yeah, well, yeah, it should be locked away, right? Just keep the rest of us safe from people like that. But the kind of my thought was, what were you expecting? Were you expecting someone to kind of put the fists up and have a fair fight outside the pub? Right. Sorry, those days are gone if they ever existed, which I'm not sure they did. But that wasn't going to happen, right? He couldn't fight very well, but he had loads of attitude and was just going to keep going and going and going and going, right? To the point at which he didn't care. Right? Throw a pool ball at someone, he had chance, stand a good chance of doing them some serious damage, and then you hit him with a bottle. Dude doesn't give a shit, right? It's like in that moment he doesn't care. Right? That's the attitude that he has, but you've got to expect that, right? If you think, well, that's not fair, then you're in a total different headspace to where you need to be in order to defend yourself effectively against someone that's like that. That's just an unrealistic expectation that people aren't going to be like that. Right? Because if they're not like that, they're not going to start fights in pubs.
Yeah, for sure.
Chances are, unless they're kind of, all mouth and no trousers. But if they're wanting to fight, then they're going to be like that. They're going to be relentless. Right?
Especially in a pub full of his peers potentially.
Yeah.
He's clearly playing pool with at least 3 of the others. There's a doubles game going on because there's loads of people carrying cues. Matey videoing it. It's videoing it for a reason. It's because he knows who's in the mix. So
and yeah. So all that pressure as well, right? All that pressure to perform. He's not going to back down very easily in front of all his mates. He's not going to lose face, and when it's on, he's going to do that, right? And the idea that there's a simple trick to dealing with someone like that, when they've got all that attitude and they won't stop and they're relentless, then training has to reflect that, right? That you're dealing with someone like that. They may not be able to fight for toffee, but they might, right? They might, fairly fortunate that he couldn't hit very hard, but imagine that they've got that attitude and they're a handful physically. They know how to punch, right? They've done the obligatory 2 years of boxing as a teenager. They've done the 6 weeks of judo at school, and so they know how to strangle you. They know how to throw you to the floor, and they know how to hit you in the head, and they got all that attitude as well. Or even worse, they've done the 9 months of MMA, and they have a UFC t-shirt on. They've done some training, and they have that attitude that they just want to mess you up. They don't give a shit whether they get into trouble about it or not. That's the enemy to train for, not the guy that just slaps you rather than hammer fists you. But yeah, and I think the other thing was the amount of what we call ragging, right? The amount of use of clothes to manipulate you. That was 90% of what was going on in the rest of it, which is the use of clothes and attire to move you around. A lot of it was pushing, pulling you about, trying to drag you to the floor. And I don't know that many other places that kind of train that a great deal, right? It seems to be a thing that doesn't get talked about unless you're involved in a jacketed sport like judo or sambo. The idea that training is done in clothing, and clothing is both a tool and a problem. If you're not using the clothing, then you're not training to have someone use your clothing against you. You're missing a huge part of what real violence looks like.
Yep, absolutely. And it sort of starts in the playground. We've sort of seen this before. When you haven't had any training, when you go to fight, there's pushing and pulling, and then you grab onto each other, and then you rag each other around till someone falls, and then someone makes something up. And it's just an escalation of that. It is a really default thing to do when you haven't trained to keep your hands in, to throw those out and bring them back. Then you keep your hands out, keep them away, but same time, grab them. Don't let them get too close. Don't let them leave you.
I think the kind of the model is, I think Richard Grannon called it thug jitsu, right? There's a method, right? There's a framework, which is, you try and hit them in the head, like the guy did to begin with. Try and hit them in the head, right? And then you grab hold of them and you just drag them to the ground as quickly as you can, because intuitively, as human beings, as animals, we know that stood up you're a threat, but on the floor you're less of a threat, right? Because now I'm stood up, you're not, and I can employ the biggest tools I've got, my feet and legs, to smash you into oblivion, right? If I'm panicked, if I'm fearful of you, I don't want to get damaged by you. I'm going to try and hit you in the head to wobble you a little bit, preferably from behind, so I stand even less chance of getting hit, right? Grab your clothing, drag you to the floor, and then kick you, and then hope my mates join in and do it as well, so there's even less chance of you getting up, right? That's just intuitive. But like you say, it breaks down when the first punch doesn't land properly and you both grab hold of each other, and then it becomes this kind of stiff-armed wrestling match, until one gets some kind of dominance to drag the other one to the floor, or you both end up on the floor. But that model never seems to get spoken about or even practiced in that kind of stalling way. And that's why I bang on about it. But as well as kind of learning to strike, learning to hold, use the clothing, throw, and not get thrown by that, not get your head snapped down by that is a crucial part of dealing with that kind of attack.
Yeah, definitely.
A much underrated thing, ragging and being ragged about by your clothing.
And you become unaccustomed to it, like with a lot of things, falling to the ground. You stop doing that when you become an adult, more or less. Rolling around, climbing things and looking down from height, all these things you do as a kid, you sort of, as an adult, you stay on the pavement and you walk about. You tend not to fall over too much. You tend not to be ragged about unless you're in a contact sport. Like, if it's not martial arts based, then perhaps something, some Sunday league football. They like a bit of a pulley shirt. If you a bit of rugby and that, but that's the minority. Most people are not accustomed to being ragged about, like proper ragdolled about. It shakes people up,
No, I think that that's and we've said it before, and we've noticed a difference over the years, which is kind of the separateness of two groups that come to training in terms of their being accustomed to physicality, right? Like you say, the ones who have maybe done some rugby or Sunday league football, or they're just used to kind of sports and interpersonal contact, and they've pursued that after school for a number of years. And they go, oh yeah, well yeah, I'm used to someone kind of grabbing my head and forcing it down, or it's not so left field that I can't cope with it. And then you get other people, like say, who it's a total shock, and they come away not having sustained any injury, but feeling totally battered both emotionally and physically from it, and they go, oh god, it really shook me up. I didn't like it, and it's like, yeah, well, you've either got to get to tolerate it and like it a little bit, or stop, because that's the way we train. That's the way training has to be. Right? It has to be like that, because that's how it will be. And that kind of leads me on to something I thought I mentioned, which is that kind of level of expectation is actually quite interesting. I always find people that go, oh yeah, I know it's going to be really violent, it's going to be, so the training is going to be really kind of physical, and I'm going to be thrown, I'm going to get thrown, I'm going to be slammed into the wall, I'm going to be bounced off other people, I'm going to trip over others and so on. And the others and some people that come in, and some adapt to that. They go, oh yeah, this is really realistic. This is and we lead them along. But others who perhaps from the outside as well think, well, why does it have to be like that? Is that why are you doing this kind of brutal sort of stuff? I mean, it's not terribly brutal. It's not as bad as it could be, but why are you doing? Why does it have to be like that? All I wanted was some self-defense, right? I thought I could come in and you could teach me some moves. We get this, occasionally, I just want to learn a few moves, that will help me. Okay, well, come on a short course, but that a few hours will perhaps give you a few tricks, Fairbairn's tricks, and they were tricks, right? They were sleights of hand. They were things to get you out of stuff if it worked in a pinch, which we can give you in 6 hours. But it's not going to be overly reliable. But when you're going to die, well, you might as well roll the dice, right? You might as well try and chin jab him. You might as well try and do this. You might as well try and do this, because if you don't, you're dead, right? So it's the last roll of the dice. But for learning how to defend yourself, in a full-on physical sense, it requires more than that. And I like the way someone put it to me recently, which is, have you ever seen like two fighters, not professional fighters, but two fighters in something like MMA or Kudo, or something that's like mixed martial art, punching, kicking, throwing, right? Just amateurs, maybe fighting their 8th or 10th fight each, right? And they'll fight for 10 minutes, not including the breaks, 5-10 minute rounds or whatever it is, right? And at the end, right, they're both still standing, right? And one wins by a decision, right? They fought with everything they've got for 10-15 minutes as amateurs, right? Not world champions, not professionals, right? Just people that train 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 5 times before a comp or something, for a couple of years, and then they compete. And these are hard guys, right? These are hard people, that because they have to be, and they'll endure that for however many minutes. And then what you want to say to me is, well, actually, when I take someone like that and I put a knife in their hand, what I want you to give me, Dave, is a few moves to deal with them.
Yeah.
Like, no, you take someone like that and you put a knife in their hand, it gets harder, not easier. So it doesn't get easier. It doesn't somehow go, oh yeah, this is a much more complicated situation, much more chance that, oh, actually what we need is simpler solutions, right? We need just a few twisty wristy techniques and stuff, right? The simple stuff wouldn't work against them unarmed, right? So it's not going to work against them armed, right? And so this kind of expectation thing of well, why can't it be like this? Well, because I'm afraid you've been hoodwinked into thinking that's what violence is, and that's what self-defense provides you, some kind of magic wand that you can just wave in a physical sense, and you'll be safe, because we have these secret techniques that are just so powerful that they couldn't possibly be used in a sporting situation. But if I teach these three things to you, then you'll be safe against the most aggressive, determined guy with a knife.
Yeah, yeah. Kung Fu Hustle. You seen that film?
No, I haven't. No, I
Oh,
know.
it's
I remember
fantastic.
the video cover, but I've never seen the film.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The guy, the guy as a young kid is sort of knocked about a bit, and some clearly sort of snake oil salesman, wizened old sort of Chinese sort of traveling master sells him these pamphlets on these super secret techniques, and he said it's the sort of Jack and the Beanstalk type story, and he buys them and reads them sort of thing, and gets ridiculed as a kid, but they do turn out to be like super techniques at the end of it. But that's because there's some, it's the sort of the latent sort of Chinese mystical bit that comes into it. But yeah, it's the same principle. Buy a few pamphlets and read it, and you've got the Buddha death palm that will take out anybody, and whatever.
The five-finger donkey punch or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Dragon's beat to rear wisdom tooth.
It's one of my favorites. That.
Yeah. No, yeah. And so part of the point of the video, actually, I don't know what you kind of thought, whether it was a worthy video to watch, was A, to think about the self-defense part, but also then to think about, well, what are the kind of capabilities of your average Joe or whatever, right? Maybe they won't be very high. We can't rely on that. Maybe they won't be very high, but the tenacity, the ferocity, the determination to mess you up regardless, expect that. You got to train for that, right? Because that guy, however hard he thought he was, the old guy, right, he wasn't expecting that. Like you say, he wanted to remonstrate, he wanted to tell him how it is. He wasn't expecting that. He thought it was over twice, and it wasn't. The other guy had, it takes two of you to decide that it's over, and the other guy decided it was far from over.
Yeah, and on top of that, you might have an ineffectual but sort of really aggressive intent, like your man in green. You stand him up in the street, and you'll see how it goes between the two of you. You introduce it into that environment where there's chairs on the floor. It's suddenly wet because there's pints. There's a guy lying down. There's a pool ball rolling around somewhere. There's things in the way. There's a pillar near the bar. Suddenly you're not sort of bopping and weaving and sort of shimmying left and right. You then don't need them to be effective, because the environment will compensate. A few numbers and a tough environment, and then the relentless sort of assault. It's hugely problematic.
And then on top of that, the ability to throw a couple of really hard straight shots and to dump him hard on the floor would likely serve you very well in situations like that. It would be interesting to see how he stood up to getting hit hard, right? He wanted to try and hit people, but in my experience, people don't want to fight you; they just want to hurt you. And it would be interesting to see how he took the pain.
Yeah. I mean, we could sit here with some sort of both 2020 hindsight and also some abilities between us to say, well, this is what we could do tactically in that environment, but that's not what that's about.
No.
So,
I mean, we could play armchair quarterback and go, well, he should have done this, should have done that, and that wasn't that wasn't the point of the video. The point of the video, I think, was apart from the kind of don't be in that situation, don't go into that pub, exit as soon as you can. Those kind of common sense self-defense things, which unfortunately aren't so common. Beyond that, the kind of the illustration of the kind of the tenacity of the enemy potentially in that situation. Once you're on the wrong side of someone like that, then you can't expect them to stop when you want to stop.
When you think the fight's over, tighten your helmet straps.
Yeah, exactly.
twice he missed an opportunity to tighten his helmet strap, didn't he?
Yeah, and just to leave, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
grab your mate and run, right? Drag him out the pub, right? You're on the wrong end of it. Get out the pub.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. No, interesting.
Good.
Yeah, it is. It is good. It is good.
Good. Right. Well, I hope it was some way valuable. And your turn next, I believe.
Yep. I shall find us something, and we'll come back to it in the not too distant future. Look forward to
Cool.
it.
Okay. Well, enjoy Italy.
Yeah, we'll do, and I'll see you in a week.
Okay.
Cheers,
Good to
buddy.
speak to you, mate.
You
Bye.
all. See ya.